So we are now live with our weekly masterclass call. This week we'll be talking about boundaries and saying no. This week I am joined by my co-host, Jess Mishler.
Hello.
I also call her Bubbles.
AKA Bubbles.
AKA Bubbles. So I'm super excited to have Jess here. She brings in her own perspective as we all do. So I'm really excited to just hear what she has to say. And then as always, we have Carrie and Renee, which we super appreciate. You guys are always here with us. And then we have our buddy Donnie. Donnie is part of our cosmic family, and we're super stoked to have him. And hopefully we'll have some more people kind of jump on over time, or at least people asking us some questions on the page. And so we're talking about boundaries, saying no. And the first question that I had to kind of walk us into this whole conversation is kind of just going around the room and saying what are boundaries, right? What is the understanding, so we at least can put a frame around it. And how have you used boundaries, or how have you used boundaries in your spiritual journey, and as your spiritual journey has kind of progressed, how have your boundaries have had to progress as well? So I don't know who wants to go first with it. Don't be shy.
For me, especially in this past year, I really had to learn a lot about being okay with setting boundaries with my family, and understanding that doesn't mean that I don't love them and I'm not there for them, but just, where is the healthy boundary? Where do I place the boundary so that it's healthy in order for me to really, have a healthy life, and to, I guess I'll be really open here, but to not be brought down by, what's going on with my family. And so, placing boundaries, maybe even around holidays, might be kind of like, this year I'm not going to be there for Thanksgiving because I don't have the space this year to be in the mix. Let's just say that. And so that was me putting up a boundary. And I guess that's, there's also small boundaries throughout the day where you say, maybe you're talking to somebody, even, a close friend, and maybe they're talking about something that you just don't have the energy for. And you just kind of got to say, I don't have the space for this right now. And I don't know. I feel like I kind of got lost in that right there, but what do you guys think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the beginning, right? And especially that's kind of like the very beginning topic that you brought up is kind of the reason why we're doing this call now, because we're going into November and it's towards the end of the year, but it's also towards the very much looks forward time of the year where you get to join family and see family, and also the shit is the time of the year again where you get to see family. So it's kind of like it can go either way. So it's really like how, and we've all been doing a lot of work, and this year has been very powerful for a lot of people. So as you're kind of progressing and kind of breaking free, how do you protect yourself? As you're getting more and more raw with who you are and what you know about you, and then you go back to your family that only knows what they know about you. So it's just like, you have to, how do you deal with that? Is that ringing some bells for everybody? Is that making anybody feel in a special kind of way where the conversation is going? Ooh, it's a good topic because nobody's talking. Everybody's shy. That's what we know.
Well, so no, that hits home with me too. I have 4 kids. I was a single mom, and everything like revolved around my kids. So, and I like joined the search and rescue back 15 years ago so that I would have to ride my horse. It's kind of silly, but I would have an appointment from somewhere outside because I didn't have those boundaries. So as I've evolved and as I've grown and kind of figured out who I am, I've really had to like take that time to really make sure that things are good with me, and that it is things are what I want to do and are in alignment with where I'm going. So, and it's been interesting because a lot of the families like, what the hell's your problem? You know, and I'm full. And it makes me question myself sometimes. But then when I go back and like sit and think about it, I'm like, no, I made that decision for a reason. And my kids, I think, have really, I mean, they're older, they're all out of the house, but it's interesting because at first they really bucked me on things like that. But then as they've seen it progress, they're like, oh, so you're not at my beck and call, and I probably shouldn't be at so-and-so's beck and call. So it's been a good, it's bled off into my children so that they've kind of and done the same things. So but boundaries are hard, you know, especially like coming from an old codependent and where I was just a big pleaser growing up and did everything for everybody else. It's hard. And I have it like written all over my office, you know, no with a period. That is a complete sentence. I often want to like go into why and justify it and things like that. And it's really not. No is a complete sentence, and so is yes. So if it's an alignment, just taking that time. So one of my sentences that I use a lot is, I'll have to get back to you. Because it gives me that minute to think about it and really make sure it's in alignment and not be quick to make my decision.
Yeah.
Unless it really comes quick, you know, where your stomach goes, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, you said a lot of things there. They're kind of awesome and super important. I think one, especially this last thing that you said, right? It's just like, how do you kind of take the time to not be so reactive as people are asking things of you and really become mindful of like, this is where I am now, right? Like I've drawn this line in the sand and not getting dragged back through the sand past that line. It's just like, shit, I'm here again. And then you have to walk all the way back. And also with your family, it's kind of like that. Why is family not encouraging you to put up your boundaries, right? Like why is that happening? Like, why are those boundaries that should be the easiest ones in a sense, right? Like supposedly, like on a conceptual kind of level, should be the easiest for you to tell somebody, hey, this is not good for me. I love you, but I need my space. But that's not the case.
You feel the most guilty.
Yeah.
You say it and then you're like, wait, fuck, that's not what I meant to say. But you're like, yeah, that's what I meant to say. There's like so much questioning after you lay down a boundary, or like even with a boundary with, you know, the people that I work with. If I get a job and I, you know, lay out what, you know, I will do this, this, and this for this, and then like waiting for a response, I'm like, oh shoot, like why did I say that? And I'm like, no, that's what I wanted to say. That's my boundary. So there's like so much fear and terror in putting down your boundary, and like really just learning how to surrender and trust in putting the boundary there and putting yourself first, and just trusting in the universe that, you know, it's all going to play out for you when you do that.
So how that feels through to me too, right? Like, is that weird feeling that you get the moment you lay down a new boundary or try to create boundaries. So how have you guys been able to kind of like allow that boundary to work and not immediately kind of like take the boundary back and be like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to like take that boundary. So how do you sit comfortably or uncomfortably in this new lines that you're creating?
Well, it's not always easy. I think with setting boundaries, because people were so used to me not setting boundaries, that I have gotten a lot of rebuttal. I've lost some friends, which when you think about it later, you're like, okay, that was a better thing to let go. But it doesn't feel good in the now when you make that decision. But in the long term, when I start looking back at like the things that have changed and the way things have progressed, it's so much better. But when it's happening, to me, it does not feel good for the most part. It's a struggle. It is something that I have to go, okay, make a decision. And then it's almost like, okay, I got to say it and I got to get the hell off the phone so I don't get dragged back into something.
Yeah. Has it becoming easier?
Yes, 100%.
The more boundaries you put down, is that becomes easier?
Yeah, and I think it weeds out a lot of people though too, out of my life. And it's interesting too, because even like my parents, they've started to change a little bit. They're respecting my boundaries a little bit better, because I've held strong to them. And at first, I think they thought that I was just kind of full of crap, that I wasn't going to hold tight on it. And I'm sure I didn't in the beginning, but they have started to respect them a little bit more. But they're still the first ones to cross it. Mm-hmm. But they feel they have that right. They're my parents, right?
Yeah.
Which wrong.
Yeah, but it's a process of re-educating.
Yeah.
Everybody. What about you, Donnie, Renee? Is any of this feeling?
Yeah, there's two. There's actually three things that come to mind. One is a boundary. One is a boundary that I had set a few years ago, and I just realized the effect that it had. And I used to spend a lot of time with a lot of different people in my community, and I would just like go spend time with their family, and because I did outside sales, so I would go like have clients, and I would be in a certain neighborhood, and I'd stop on by, and then one year I decided that I'm gonna go all in on my career, and really, really set myself up and any extra time that I had was gonna be spent with my family, and then after about a year and a half, I ran into the people that I used to spend a lot of time with. They kind of like got cold shoulder with me, and I didn't like get invited to a wedding, and which is like on Saturday. And I'm like, at first I was kind of like, oh man, like why am I not invited? I thought it was like family, and then just over the last recent experiences, they would say things like, oh, he's too busy for us now, and he's all he is business, and and it's like, no, it's like I'm about my there's an ice cream truck driving by. I apologize. I'm actually sitting outside on a giant pumpkin. Yeah, so this has been my conference call spot the last month. And they said some things that kind of like really made me consider the lines that I had drawn. And it's like, no, I feel good about that. And if you can't respect the boundaries that I'm taking care of my family, and I'm providing for my family, and I'm giving everything to my family, my daughter and my girlfriend and my house. And if you can't respect that and you take that personal, I'm sorry. Like, I love you, and I hope you're doing your thing, but I'm doing my thing. And, I'd love to get some coffee, but I'm not going to sit here every Friday night and when I could be at home with my family or providing for my family. So that was one thing. Another thing is my business, my job has been asking a lot of me, and normally I'm all about giving, but I started to realize that giving everything to every single person that asks of something can only allow you to give so much. And I started drawing lines where it's like, I'm going to be spending time with my family. I'm limiting the amount of hours that I'm working. I'm limiting on the responsibilities that I'm taking on. And it's kind of manifested a year and a half later into a lateral move in the company where I'm relinquishing myself of responsibilities, so that way I can feel a little bit more free with the responsibilities that I do have and that I do choose to keep. And so it's been a really new thing for me, as it feels like.
Yeah.
Setting boundaries almost feels really new to me. I'm normally the yes man for everybody. At least that's what I felt like for a long time.
Yeah. I love that. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs tend to gravitate towards being the yes man, because that's kind of like what we're taught, is just like say yes and figure it out later. And then you really don't realize, right? You don't realize how often you're saying yes and the quality of those yeses, right? And you don't realize that the more yeses you give out to other people, the less yeses you have for you. And that can be yeses for you personally with yourself, or once you run out of your own yeses, you start taking yeses away from your family, your close friends, and then you just kind of start robbing from everybody else that is around you. But then what you got, at least it sounds like, is that you got less commitments and more freedom to do what you actually wanted to do anyways.
Yeah. And what you said, that word quality, that was something that came up for me like 2 months ago. I want to raise the quality of my impact, but less focus on the quantity of my impact, because I felt like I was really stretching myself out. And I really wanted to raise the quality of my relationships, the quality of my experience living life, and not just like constantly be doing something in service of other people. And it just felt like, man, I have to do this for other people. I have to do this for other people. And then I thought, well, if I just quit my job today, the company's still going to go on. And that's okay.
Yeah. And that's the reality of life, right? Like no matter where you think, you know what I mean? Like life goes on. Awesome. Renee, I'm super curious now to hear your perspective, because I know you and Donnie probably live in very different realities. And to you, what boundary is, it's probably a very much more energetic kind of boundary to people and their energy and whatever they're going through. So I'm curious to hear what your perspective is.
So in the human spectrum, I came in boundaryless and remained boundaryless for a really extended period of time, which I've yet to really say that I get it. I don't. A lot of it was implied consent. I would say it's a growth. It would challenge you to address some of these hidden aspects of yourself as to, again, if the cosmological framework is where you're functioning from, my company's the cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's not a boundary that most people can relate to. Then you come into the universe and you say, okay, so the universe is a company and I'm taking directions from the universe. And then you come into the galaxy and excuse me, I'm just going to use the language I have. There's just a lot of muck. When I got to the galactic realms, there was a tremendous amount of muck. And yet the ability to challenge the entrainment field came very late in life for me. And at that point, my physical body experienced a tremendous amount of override, infiltration, confusion, disorientation, and I remained committed to the big picture. So I've discovered that those are qualities of a visionary, regardless of whether you're functioning, in your human skin first or not, that you just have a completely different way of viewing, and your commitment to the vision can be such an intensity. And you really have to find alignment through other people And to me, it was focalizing the energy to create a lens so that you're not diffusing. For me, I really felt like I was the sun dropped into the ocean. And so my greatest atrophy is the self. It really is. And I would say it's the first time, you know, I'm able to say that and not flinch. If anyone had told me that I would be the physical age I am and able to do that, there's a lot of contradictions. So boundaries to me don't really exist in the same framework. I feel torque and tension around people's fields. So if I set a boundary, what I experience is the torque and tension in my field, their field, the greater field, and it just goes out like Russian dolls.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't ever feel comfortable, not ever. And is it getting easier? Fuck no. No, the planet's getting wonkier. People on the planet are being presented with a lot of the stuff that is percolating or purging. Finding a group like this is lovely because I put out an ask to the universe, because otherwise I remain pretty isolated and insulated.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the work that I've been doing is coming to a close. I'm going to take a big break from being a rehab center, my unconventional rehab center for people. I'm going to take a break because I have discovered that I can't set boundaries, because in the midst of that, there's a crisis, and I respond to the crisis like that.
Mm-hmm.
I respond to it energetically. I'll get throttled out of bed. I'll be awake. And I've asked the universe to let me know. So it's very, you know, it's like sirens. I get 911 calls and they're sirens. And then I'm up in the middle of the night and I'm looking around. It's like, okay. And I work remotely. Now, part of it is the challenge is, how do you create an income stream based on a reality that no one even knows exists? And I'm going to say that's a challenge for people in the new paradigm. It's a human, HUE, paradox. And when there's enough people participating, it changes the consensus reality. That allows someone to create a framework that is less porous, but still allows the energy to come through so that we're not in that all or nothing. I don't know that I'm not going to impel myself and say it'll never be comfortable. I just have no expectations that this will ever be comfortable.
Yeah. So did you experience over the years the sense of boundaries, that there are some boundaries that are kind of coming in and progressing faster than others? Like, for example, what comes to mind, right? The reason I'm asking that is, in the years that you've been here, the boundaries in the sense of a woman's body have changed kind of drastically.
Yeah.
Right. In the sense of like what, and not just the woman's body, also like the rights of a woman, the ability of a woman. So those are all boundaries for me, right? And what a woman was allowed to say yes or no to. So do you see more boundaries kind of, so is it, as you mentioned just now, do we just get to a critical mass of boundary shift and acceptance for everybody to embrace it, or where do you see that going?
My
And
perception.
that question is for anybody. Sorry.
Yeah, my perception is going to be fast. Shadow work means releasing some of the boundaries. And that's something you have to do ancestrally. And if you're willing to do that, then it unlocks the trauma and the terror, because you know, I know that, you know, we've talked about this, but terror to me locks in everything. So if you're using boundaries to lock in the terror, well, then you're going to have to undo the boundary to get to the terror and create something else.
See, I see boundaries as setting you free.
Mm-hmm.
I see boundaries is honoring who you are. And even though it's uncomfortable, you know, sometimes for me to have to say no, or, you know, maybe it's uncomfortable for me to have to tell my friend, you know, that I can't help her in that way, or I can't stay as long as she would like me to stay. And I mean, these are all very silly, simple things, but you know, there's a level of discomfort. You know, I'm working with this woman who's also my friend. And in order for us to get, we're both freelance, and in order for us to get a higher rate, we were supposed to sleep in the same hotel room. And it was, you know, would have been good for both of us, but I can't work 7 days straight and stay in the same hotel room with somebody. And so I had to say no. And that was super uncomfortable because it meant she was making less and I was making less, and she's bringing me on the job. But that was my boundary. And it's a very simple thing that seems very, you know, third dimensional, but it's not, because I was honoring myself. And so in that way, boundaries set me free. And really, it's like forcing me to go into the shadow and into the trauma. So
And that's a very different way of looking at boundaries, right? So I don't know, and really you can speak for yourself, but I feel that what you were trying to say is that sometimes people use boundaries to then protect themselves. So they establish boundaries to then keep themselves within the limits of what it's comfortable, what's known to them. So even that's why at the beginning I asked, how do you define boundaries? Because it could be a protective thing, it could be a offensive thing almost, right? Like if I'm going to protect it like this because this is the limit of me, to where I want you to come in. And then you can also use boundaries as like, okay, I'm going to protect myself, put these boundaries, and I'm going to go hide all the way back here. And then nobody's going to get past those boundaries. And you have a lot with people that just don't, people that have gone through a lot of trauma don't put themselves in the situation of even like being near the same situation for that exact reason, right? Because so they have those boundaries in place to kind of protect themselves. So are all boundaries good?
I think it's like a dance, you know. I think that it's an art of how we implement the boundary, you know, depending on what the situation is, depending on who it's with. It's delicate, or it's not, or it's harsh, depending, you know. So
One of the boundaries that Lauren, my girlfriend, has recently set is what I have this tendency to emotionally react with quick responses. And I realized over a lot of reflection over the last month and a half that I say a lot of things reactionary that I don't really mean, and I don't even remember saying it. And it's gotten to the point now where if I start to raise my voice or any definition of yelling that Lauren feels, she will immediately respond with, I'm not going to respond to you the way you're talking to me. And because we would have these cycles of these arguments that we'd work through, and that's been her way of like breaking the cycle. And it's allowing me to bring awareness to my action. And I like to think of myself as a little child again. And like, man, I'm just like walking around this glass shop breaking things. I don't even know I'm breaking it. I'm just being, like, oh, I need to learn like what my words and my actions have been causing. And it's hard to hear in the moment because it is a very icy, very like firm boundary. But I see the benefit and I see the potential growth that's going to come of that. So in that sense, that's something that I've been excited about in terms of boundaries.
I love that, because that's the other perspective, right? Of like, how do we receive somebody's boundaries? Like when somebody lays down a boundary, okay, like how do you receive it? And that's hard, because it's always easier to be on this side of things, right? It's always easier to be the one setting boundaries and be like, oh, well, respect my boundaries.
Yeah.
But how do you respect other people's boundaries? Right. And then also in this time of growth, as you're growing a lot, you may get to the limits of your self a lot quicker. You may recognize your boundaries and other people's boundaries. So you may start pushing and pulling for other people to remove their boundaries. But what if people are not ready? What if you see a pattern, you're like, this, you need to set some boundaries, and especially with friends and family. How do you do that? How do you help the ones you love setting boundaries? Because that's a whole other topic, right? You can see people that don't have any boundaries, and you're just like, shit, man, you just need the whole put your own oxygen mask on first before putting it on everybody else. It's that kind of moment. And I feel like a lot of people are living in that moment now of like just realizing that it's time for them to kind of take a breath. And it's been so long since they've had the opportunity to kind of take a breath. So how do you support somebody?
I feel like it's kind of like the domino effect, you know, like you see, you know, you're in the presence of your friends setting boundaries, and you're in that essence, and then, you know, it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's I can't think of the word. Yeah, it's just like, you know, I guess because I can't think of the word, like you learn from example, or just like being around it and feeling what it feels like, and then seeing how it felt good for that person, and then wanting it to feel that way for you.
I know sometimes that, especially in the past, when someone has set a boundary, there are times that I've taken it personally, like what I do. Oh my gosh, you know, and so when I set a boundary and someone has an issue with it, I try and vice versa. When I have an issue with a boundary that someone else has set, I try and really put myself in that spot that, okay, what can I take care of? What of this is me? And give them space that this isn't about me, it's about them and their boundaries.
Has anybody ever set a boundary for you for someone else? Like just being like, I realize that we're not good for each other, or I realize that this is not good for you, or this is not that for you. So like, I am going to just remove myself from this. Has that ever been a thing? And how does that make it easier? Does that make it harder, or?
Well, it doesn't, it's like giving yourself a timeout. So to me, again, I'm going to come in with my cosmic weirdo lens and my kaleidoscopic reality, which is not likely to change. Apparently it's an asset. I'm looking forward to really experiencing that fully, but I'm still here, so I'm still dealing with it. The kaleidoscopic reality says there's me, there's you, there's the energy, there's the projection, and I'm dealing with programs and entities all the time. So I listen to people, and there's times when entities and programs are coming through, I hear it like that. And that's a different response. And they don't care about your boundaries. They're astral beings. And if someone is now open their field and expressing the muck in their field, which just happens around me all the time, it's like, well, if it's not them, stepping out of it isn't really an option. You can take a break from it and then choose to come back in. However, they have no memory of what they said. So negotiating, it's all a negotiation. It's not a boundary. You can't set boundaries with astral beings, and everyone has astral fragments. At that point, to me, you check in to see, there is no ready in the field I live in. Are they willing to approach? And if so, can I be guided to be the one who suggests, wow, that was really interesting. Was that really you? Because this is what I heard you say. But that means I have to be willing to trigger it all over again. That's not easy on the human nervous system. And I've learned that one the hard way. It's a big ask.
Yeah.
It kind of comes down to what is your sum total role to be here in your human suit?
Mm-hmm. And it brings back,
yeah,
and it brings back kind of what Donnie was saying, right? Even for him in that moment when he gets mad, if Lauren, right? Is that what you say your girlfriend's name is? If Lauren quizzes him in the moment, and like, how often does that happen? Like, if somebody quizzes you in the moment, like, what did you just say to me? You're just like, I don't know. Right? So how are you supposed to be mindful of somebody else's boundaries when a lot of time you're not even conscious as to what you're saying? Imagine how you're making them feel, because that goes way beyond what you're saying. This is the whole non-spoken way you make somebody feel. Which kind of leads me into this next question, kind of just came to mind, is how does the non-spoken way that we act interfere with people's boundaries? Because what you say, it's kind of easy. Don't talk to me like that. Or don't do this. But then there is the whole energetic boundaries of don't come into my space energetically, or don't attack me energetically, or don't think of me that way. Can you even ask somebody to have that level of boundary, as to like, don't be cosmically attacking me with your thoughts and your visions and whatever? Is that even something that you can do for somebody? Like, you can ask somebody. Renette says yes.
If they're consciously there. But I think that's just like, going inside and doing your work and learning how to protect yourself, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the whole point of this too, right? It's that as you're doing this work, you'll realize that you need more or less boundaries, and then you're more and more conscious of how your boundaries haven't been respected.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool to I do some cranial work with horses, and one of the things we did with the horses when I was first learning, and we actually did it with people. We stood in two different lines and we faced each other, and one person got blindfolded, and then the proctor, whoever, told the group that was blindfolded to carry a certain emotion. And then you walked, you like anger. So you like think angry thoughts, and you'd walk towards that person slowly that was blindfolded. And it was really interesting to see how, I mean, because we started like 50 yards apart. It was crazy. I was like, yeah, for real? we're going to get all the way up there. It's like that whole, when the kid, red light, green light is what I felt like we were going to be doing. But it was really interesting because depending on the person you worked with, as you walked forward and you're pushing out this energy of like anger, your feelings, just like simple feelings, not even like your big whole energetic body, even then that's part of it. People would put their hand up when they could feel you. But it was interesting to watch because you do the angry thing and you'd walk towards someone and like really quick, their hand would come up and stop. And then other times you do like happy, joyous things like that. And you'd walk towards the person and they'd get a smile on their face. And then pretty soon they're like, oh, stop. I can feel you. but it was so enlightening on how far my energy travels ahead of me if I'm cognizant of keeping it with me. You really can push your energy out a long way and affect people all around you. And it just was a really cool exercise, because horses are like way more, they feel you like when you're not even thinking, you're thinking about them. But people are so, they're not aware, but they are so, their body is in tune with your energies and they pick them up really quickly. So it is a really important thing to know where you are and where your energy is, and to have some boundaries on that.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up, because that's so clear to me a lot of times, and it's more and more clear as I do more and more of this work. So I can feel the people the moment they walk, even clients, the moment they walk into my office, I'm just like, it's gonna be a no for me. Like it's not gonna work. But then you notice with animals, they do it so much faster than us.
Yeah.
But because their programming is just very different. Does that person feel good? Yes or no? No. Done. Yes. Okay. Maybe yes, some food. Let's explore this relationship. So we have a question on our live, or mostly a statement, but it brings me a question. So, and Lauren says, I still tend to remove myself because that's all I have control over if my space is that disrespected. Which
No.
it's great, yet it's not. How do you feel about that? Because I have my own feelings about it. So before I let my feelings out, I'm gonna like express it so that other people can give some feedback on it.
I was gonna say, I think awareness is the first part. That she is aware of that is awesome. That's like the first starting piece. As she grows in that, then, or at least with me, I get awareness, and sometimes I can't handle it. Sometimes it's too much. Sometimes it's like, oh shit, I feel it, but I don't know what to do with it. So get the hell out of there. But as time goes on and you start being more aware and kind of going, oh, this happened last time, you kind of get some tools in there, or you have some I don't know, ideas on how to address it. And so, and I think that's something that it sounded like she did, is like, no, you have to stop. I can't be here. I can't respond to this. So it's just a progression, as it has been with me, to like first get that awareness and like, what the hell, what do I do with this? And then work into, okay, so here, this work, I tried this, it didn't work. So next time maybe I'll try this. And then until you figure out where you can still hold your boundary and maybe continue or figure out some other system that works better than getting the hell out of there. But if that's the first thing you need to do, I mean, to protect yourself, I think that's totally viable. I don't think it's an end all, but
yeah,
I think it's.
I love how you explained that, because that was kind of the feeling that I had, but I was kind of lacking words as to how to explain it, right? And my thought was, it's a fixing, but it's not a solution.
Mm-hmm.
Like you may be fixing the problem in the moment, but at the same time, if every time an argument happens, every time this happens, you run out of the house.
Yeah.
The solution is never going to be fixed. And that, given that it takes time and it takes power for you to kind of come into your power, especially if you have been boundaryless for a long time, and not boundaryless in the way Renee has been boundaryless, but boundaryless in the way that like you haven't had any power or control in your life to even establish boundaries. It may take some time.
Well, and I used to have a similar situation with my son, and he would just like run away. So one of the things we did is we set a timer. You can run away, but you're running away for 5 minutes. And then you have to come back and we have to talk about it. And we might hit a point where we have to take another break, but we'll set the timer for another 5 minutes so we can both get a break. And then we have to come back until we resolve the issue. Yeah. So that space to kind of recenter yourself and to figure out where you are and collect yourself back together, your pieces. It really helped with us. And the timer was like a thing that's, it's neither of us saying, okay, I'm ready. You know, it's just, hey, timer, it's neutral, 5 minutes, give us 5 minutes. Now let's work on it again.
Yeah. Lauren says, I relate so much to that, Carrie. It's definitely a progression, and to have gotten this far is a mega triumph, but I know there is further to go. That's awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so as always, I want to be mindful, and I'm super grateful that you guys have decided to spend the better part of an hour with me and Jess. We love it, but we're glad that you guys are here. There's about 10 minutes left. We had some questions, but I just kind of want to wrap it up and see what kind of last parting thoughts, and really just maybe some actual practical thoughts on if you don't feel like you have any boundaries, or if, like Lauren, you're working on growing that boundary muscle, what kind of workouts are you going to do? Like, what does that workout regime look like? You know, are we going yoga? Like, what's going on? Like, how do boundaries work?
I take a minute and I just really check in with myself. I just check in with how I feel. I just slow it down and I go from there. I just go with what feels right and go with what feels good for me. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that so much. That's something that what Jess just said is just checking is just something that I've been learning. One of the things that really comes to mind that I feel like I've done in the past unconsciously is like asking people that were taking a moment to reflect on whatever event had just happened, checking in with how I feel, and then asking myself, how would I rather feel in this next situation that's similar to this? Okay, cool. Who do I know, and this is one way, it's like, who do I know that I feel like that does this already? And let me get their opinion on what they would do in this situation. And then that bit of information allows me to have a different perspective on what I might try differently next time. And which is what Carrie was saying is like, try it this way and reclusing yourself from those experiences is certainly one way to do it. And I think about my life, and it's like, there are some situations, relationships where I've just decided like, hey, I'm just going to not be a part of this. And I feel good about that. And then there are other relationships where it's like, okay, well, I want to set these boundaries. I still want to play in this field, but I'm going to set these boundaries with these people. As an example, there's a core group of people in my work that tend to party a lot. And I had mixed feelings about hanging out with them just because I just had mixed feelings about hanging out with them. And I decided that, I'm going to go out into the world and live in the world with them a little bit in these experiences. But these are the boundaries that I set. And I just started like, every time I would go to these places, I would set a boundary. And if I felt like I couldn't set boundaries anymore, if I felt like the boundaries were getting crossed, I would just say, it's time for me to leave. And I would just say bye with a smile and just, all right, guys, like I'm out. And it'd be like 12 o'clock, we're at a club, and it's like, oh, I'm going to my hotel room. Or we're out at the bar, with these people that I work with that, I do like to associate with. But then I would say, all right, I found myself like stepping across my own boundaries. Like, I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to step away, think nothing less or anything different of these people. Like, I still love them, but I also understand that the boundaries that I set upon other people, they choose to respect them or choose not to. And based off their choices, that's how I decide on whether I want to spend time with them or not, or how much time I spend with them.
Yeah.
That's
cool. That's super practical.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually super practical, like, advice on, like, if you don't feel like you have boundaries. I think Donnie gave you some pretty good tips on actually like proper things that you can implement tomorrow, right? Like the moment I go to this work event tomorrow and I feel this way, I'm going to walk away.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's coming up for you, Carrie?
Also, I know like when I started this process, because I was a good dissociative person, so I would, if something got really uncomfortable, I would kind of disassociate. And in order to engage my brain back to really be in me, you have to do some physical, like you got to walk, you got to be in nature, you've got to be moving, you got to have a rhythm, you know, just different things like that to get you back in your body. And I noticed, like with my son and some of his friends, that guys tend to have a much better connection with themselves when they're doing something like shooting hoop or walking out in the field, or, you know, just doing like moving, getting your body moving. If like my son, if he was sitting, oh my God, clamshell, shut up, done, not interactive. But if we were walking or if we were shooting hoop, he'd get back inside of himself and be much more present as to what he needed or what I needed. And I know sometimes if I have something that's really like strenuous or really crosses my boundaries or makes me uncomfortable, if I go out and take a walk or if I do some movement, it really brings me back into myself so I can make the better decision.
Solid advice. Renee, on that astrocosmic, blow them entities out of the way.
That's an interesting framework that you just created. Yeah. So I was extremely disassociative and out of my body. It took me a long time to get into my body. And what I recognized was I would create spheres, orbs. When something would hit and it would elicit terror, I was the fastest particle nebulizer I'd ever met. And I would go into the field and I'd be on the edges of whatever that sphere was that I created. And if I didn't create a sphere that day, then I'm gone. And so for me, it was about one, checking in, resetting my field. And if I am going to the edges, I can actually stop, and I'll say it, pause, stop, breathe, and then I can start drawing it back in like a storm. And you become that still point and that core expression that's here. And then check in and say, okay, now, can I reframe the terror? Because if I'm going to spend time with people, I'm dealing with their shit all the time. And quite frankly, I don't have to spend time around people. I get to the point where I could go hang out with that lovely bear over your shoulder.
Yeah.
And feel more comfortable. And I've done some horse constellation work, and they've shown me the expression of human is expanding. And what if we really are more like nature? Will we give ourselves permission? And I get that that's kind of the permission slip. I waited a long time to get permission from somebody outside of me. And because of the generational difference and how the planet is, I'm thrilled to see that that's not necessarily the prevailing energy. You know, it still takes courage to be in a body.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a perfect ending note, right? It takes courage.
Yep.
Like that's what all of this work boils down to. That's what all the medicine boils down to. And that's what boundaries boil down to, right? It takes courage for you to be out for you and to protect you and to say things that you've wanted to say since you may be a kid and you've just never had the chance just because. And it takes, among everything else, you know, all the tips and everything else, it's really just boils down to just being courageous. And the beginning courage is choosing to set the boundaries, the next level of courage is once that person or that energy hits that boundary you created, is how you're going to respond to it. Because there is no point in drawing your line in the sand and just letting the wind kind of cancel it out every day. You got to kind of carve it in there to a level that it can be just kind of blown away in the wind and people can just walk over it. So it is now 9 my time on the nose, and I'm super grateful as always. And I hope people have enjoyed this call. I've been deeply enjoying it. Thank you, Jess, for being my co-pilot, bubble pilot. And yeah, guys, if you enjoy these calls, sign up for the emails. You can get a recording of all the other calls that we had before this. We have now done quite a few. They range from the feminine, the masculine, the couples. And last week we talked about personal development.
Personal development.
Yeah, what comes next after personal development. So yeah, so I'm super grateful for all of you guys, and I'll see you guys next Wednesday. And if you guys enjoyed the call, sign up for our list, and love you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
So, thanks. Great seeing you. Bye.
Bye. That dog is so cute.
You say-